Jason, first of all, thanks. It's been great to have you back here again.
Thank you.
Your
Thank you
record
for
is
having
awesome.
us.
So, speaking of which, so why the Nashville Sound? Why did you decide to call it that?
Well, that was a term that was coined in and around the studio where we made this record, decades ago when it was Chet Atkins' place, and they were making a very different type of record in there in those days, countrypolitan music, trying to spread country music to the masses at the RCA studio where we recorded. And the RCA studio almost got torn down for development, and a local philanthropist, Aubrey Preston, bought the place, put Dave Cobb in charge, and kept it open as a studio. So we were real fortunate to be able to work there. And I wanted something that represented that place because it is a special place to us, and everybody involved there, we're all friends, real close friends. And also I wanted something that represented what Nashville is now compared to what it was then and compared to what it's been for the last couple decades. I think there are a lot of really great musicians and artists coming out of Nashville that don't have a whole lot to do with mainstream country music, and I'm happy to see that. I think it's developing into more of a music town rather than a country music town.
And that's a good thing.
That is, as you know, in Austin, that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. How do you see these songs in terms of your evolution as an artist and as a songwriter?
I feel like there's a transition that has to be made. If you're going to survive and you're going to keep touring and keep writing songs and keep making music, you get to a point where you either sort through your issues or you at least come to terms with them and learn how to live with them. And for me, it got to a point where I was really sort of, I was tired of singing about my own personal problems and tired of writing songs about those. So I tried to look outward, and that's a transition a lot of songwriters make. I think Bob Dylan did it the other way around. I think he started out writing about more socio-political issues and then sort of focused in on his own life as he got older, which is he does everything the opposite of everybody else. But most songwriters that I know, you get to a certain point and you've toured for a long time and you've played all these songs about your own heartbreaks, and you start thinking that there's more to the world than just what's going on in my heart and in my mind, and start to feel a little bit of a responsibility. Maybe as your audience grows, I think you have to change, and you have to start looking outside yourself for inspiration. It's always there. There's always plenty of stuff to write about, if you're paying attention.
Speaking of which, an awareness of the world around us today, White Man's World is one of the most profound, powerful songs that I have heard in a long time. And yet it's also very sweet because of the reference to your daughter.
Yeah.
Tell us about whether inspiration is the right word or not, but what provoked that song?
What provoked it? What poked the bear, huh?
Yes.
I've found that for me, the best way for me to tell these kinds of stories without being vague, the best way for me to write songs that are dealing with my values and my beliefs. Some people call them your politics. I think that's a word that's used to try to make them smaller and more manageable. I think the issue really is, what do you believe? What do you think is right and wrong? And for me, the best way for me to express those things without being vague is to make it about something that's very private and very personal to me. And the motivation for this song, the inspiration's always been there. We've never lived in a perfect world, but the motivation was when my daughter came along, I thought, well, what kind of world do I want it to be for her, and what kind of people do I want her to grow up around and to learn from and to live with, and as opposed to the kind that I grew up around, some of which were great people, but some of which were very afraid of anything that was different. And there's some lines in that song where I discuss my own responsibility as a white male, because there's the white part and there's the man part, and a lot of people address one or the other, but not both. But in my situation, the older I get, the more I realize that there are a lot of doors that have been opened for me before I even walked up to them. Just by being born a white American man, I was given a whole lot of opportunities right off the bat that a lot of people weren't given. And I think the first step towards making piece with that is learning how to hold the door open behind you, you know, or learning how to try to level the playing field for people who might be from an ethnic minority or women. I think they face a lot of the same issues, not all the same, but a lot of the same issues. And when I married Amanda, I saw that the entertainment business is nowhere near equal. You know, music business is nowhere near equal. I think because there are a lot of artists involved, it might be better than some other businesses, but she doesn't get treated the same way that a man would be treated. Not everywhere. She does here, but not everywhere. And you know, it just motivated me to try to express my belief that that's ridiculous. You know, that people are all basically the same when they come into the world, and they should be treated as such.
If We Were Vampires is another one of those deeply personal songs for you, but for anyone who can relate to it on a very personal level. I think you said that after you wrote that song, you had a hard time singing it without choking up.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. It took me half a dozen times to get through it once. Because it's very direct. I mean, that song, it's very much how I feel, you know. I think if you write enough songs, you get to a point where your thoughts just start to rhyme and start to fall into that meter, you know, especially if you're going through one of those periods where you've managed to get the spigot to open and the creative juices are flowing. You know, it seems like sometimes your thoughts just come out in song form. At least they have for me. And that was the last song that I wrote for the record. And I was home trying to relax, trying to watch TV, trying to not write another song. I thought the record was written already, and Amanda encouraged me to get off my ass and do some work and you know, stop watching Hoarders and turn the TV off and get to work, because we were going in the studio Monday and this was Friday, and so I did what she said. It turned out to be a good idea, as it usually does. But you know, that one, it's hard to find a way to write a love song now. It's like painting a sunset. It's been done so many hundreds of thousands of times. And I find the really interesting stuff to me comes after that initial spark. You know, the part of your life where you have to learn to compromise and learn to live with somebody, and then you have to learn to compromise with death, with the fact that, you know, one of you is not going to be there. And it occurred to me that without that punctuation, without the fact that, you know, at some point all this is going to stop, we wouldn't be motivated to love anybody in the first place. There would be no need for it, you know. And if you think it's hard to keep a relationship going, you know, in the age of Facebook, imagine if we all lived forever. You know, it'd be real hard to keep somebody around.
Hence the vampires.
Yeah.
You have said that if it were not for your northern Alabama roots, you wouldn't be the musician, the artist who you are today. Mm-hmm. How do you sum that up in a few words?
I got very lucky because I grew up around people who'd been making music professionally for a long time. And I think the nature of that place, like a lot of small towns where music comes from, the nature of that place is very familial. And a lot of people like David Hood and Spooner Oldham and Donnie Fritz treated me as though I was a member of their family from the time I was 14, 15 years old. And I didn't realize at that point in time really the weight of the work that they had done in the 60s and 70s. And you know, as I got older, I started studying that, and I realized that, you know, I had hit the jackpot as far as, you know, a place to grow up and learn how to play music and learn what really translated in a song, you know, what communication through art really was. And I still don't think there's ever been a better form of American art than R&B music from the late 60s and 70s. I just don't think anything ever got any better. I don't think it ever could, you know. And those folks were involved with that, and I just happened to be born in the hospital in that town where those guys had made all that music. So, I mean, yeah, that's irreplaceable, really, for me. You know, I learned about the space between the notes, and I learned about the difference in acting like you're feeling it when you're singing and actually feeling it when you're singing or playing an instrument, you know. And yeah, it's taken me very far, that's for sure. I think for the type of music that I'm trying to make, it really it makes sense to have a whole lot of input. to take in a lot of, especially fiction, because songs, there aren't any restrictions on that. It's not important if something really happened to you or not. And it doesn't matter if the narrator in the song is the person who wrote the song. Normally people think it is, which is really strange to me because, you don't watch a movie and think, well, Bruce Willis really held on to the edge of an airplane with his shoes off on Christmas Eve. But you think if somebody writes a song and they say, I did this, they think, oh my God, the person who wrote the song did that. It's amazing. Fiction has served me really well because I see what works and I see which details work, and you figure out how to set a scene up and how to put people in a different place. And if you're a songwriter, you get to use your own experience and you get to use things that you've read about and heard about, conversations you've overheard. You can come from any different perspective and mix all that together and make the characters and the stories happen that way.
Favorite authors or books?
Right now, I think George Saunders is probably about as good as we have in this country. He's only got one novel, but he's got some short stories that are pretty incredible. And I love McCarthy. I love Jennifer Egan, Dennis Johnson, Adam Johnson. Dennis Johnson passed away recently. Peter Matheson, who passed away recently, he was in his 90s, but I think his book Shadow Country is maybe my favorite. That might be my favorite piece of American fiction.
I'll check that out.
It's
How
amazing.
you find the time to read is a good question, but you have to make the time.
That's when we spend a lot of time on the road, riding down the road, and our baby's 2 years old, so she's got to be very still when we're riding. And usually when we're riding, she's asleep because we try to make the drives overnight. So I get more reading done on the road than I do at home these days. That's for sure.
That. So one last question. What advice would the 38-year-old Jason Isbell give to the 21-year-old Jason Isbell or young artist, songwriter starting out?
The only thing really that I regret, I think, is smoking. That's it. Everything else I got something positive from, not every drink I had was a good idea. Most of them weren't, but some of them were. Some of them I needed those drinks. I don't need them anymore, but even the drugs, whatever fell apart in my life, I needed that to happen so I could learn from it and learn how lucky I was. But I wish I'd never started smoking because that was hard to quit. It was really hard to quit.
Yes, it is.
Harder than anything else I ever quit.